Okay, welcome back to our discussion on the user registration. So I decided that I would not type the code line by line because we've already done this. So I will just discuss the code. Okay, so when we want the sign up user form to display, which is um, a GET request, we will use this handler. Okay, and like we did in all the handlers that show a form, we will simply parse the file. Now I went ahead and I created a sign up form here. All right, so this is my sign up form. It has three uh, input boxes: name for the username, email for the user's email, and of course password. Now I went ahead and I added the validation code. Notice the error class. If the name is wrong, we put the red box. The same for the email, same for password. Now there's one thing with password. If the password is correct and one of the other two fields is wrong, meaning we have to redisplay the form, then we do not redisplay the password. And the reason we do not redisplay the password is because the browser will want to cache the password. And so, for example, if you're using a public computer, and if this were to happen, then the browser will cache the password as a clear text password, meaning anybody can see it, anybody can read it, I mean. Okay, it's not encrypted. And so if somebody were to search through the browser's cache, they would see the password. Okay, so to avoid that, you will notice that when I run this form, the password never gets filled in, even if it was correct. Okay, so this is my sign up form. Notice on the post, it goes to user sign up. And of course, it has a non-validate option. That simply means that forms typically perform some validation checks. What we're saying is do not perform your validation check because we have our own validation checks to do. So we're going to disable it. That's what non-validate means. Okay, so our handler, of course, very simple. If there are errors, we return. Otherwise, we execute the template. And if there are errors during the execution, we display the server error and then we exit. Simple. We've seen this already. Now, when we want to actually add the user to the database, we have to go through the validation. And of course, we need to parse form. Okay. And then we need to do the post form. So we're going to get the name, we're going to get the email, we're going to get the password. Again, we've done this multiple times. And of course, I'm going to create a map that holds whether there are any errors during validation. So these are my validation checks. If name is empty, that's an error. That's a validation error. If email, if password are empty, that's also a validation problem. Of course, we have the maximum length for name and email, and we have a password maximum length greater than 50. And yeah, do I want a minimum length for a password? Yeah, I'll keep a minimum length for a password. All right, so minimum length for password is 10 and maximum is 50. Okay, so we don't want a very long password. Of course, that's up to you whether you want the sizes you want. Some people might just leave out the maximum and say it can be as much as you want, but it must be less than 10. Sorry, it must not be less than 10. Okay, so these are the checks. Again, straightforward. Now there's one thing that I want to show you, and that is how we check to see if an email is a valid email. Okay, lucky for us, there is a regular expression that people use, and it's freely available, that people use to check to see if an email is properly formed. Okay, so right under here, I'm gonna check to see if the email is valid. And if I'm correct, I think browsers actually do this as well, but we still need to do it. Okay, again, we don't want to do front-end validation. We prefer to do back-end validation, so we're sure what got in actually is correct. All right, don't leave it to the front end to do it for us. The front end can always be tricked. Okay, so we're going to create a regular expression, a variable. Let's call it email regex, and we're going to create a regular expression. So I'm going to use the regex package. Okay, regex, and I am going to compile a regular expression. And so what this does is to basically create a regular expression. So I must provide a regular expression as a string. So I have that regular expression that people use. It's freely available. I have sent you the link where they discuss this regular expression. Again, since you have studied programming languages, you looked at regular expressions, regex for short. And for example, you know what the caret means, you know what the dollar sign means, right? What comes at the end, what comes at the beginning. You notice that this says that it should start with a letter, either small or big, or it could start with a number. Okay, and of course, we have other interpretations, right? We have the star operator. Okay, so again, regular expressions. I will not be going over these regular expressions because you have studied them. Okay, so I'm going to drop this regular expression right in here, and then we will use this regular expression whereby we will give the regular expression the email and ask it to evaluate it for us. And so I'm going to say if email regex dot match string. Okay, so we want it to match the email. And so we're going to put a not here for not. So if the regex, if the email does not match the regex, then we know it's an error. And so we'll simply say errors email is some message, invalid email. Okay, that's it. That's it. So that's how you use our regex. Now there's one thing I want to add about this regex. This shouldn't be here. It shouldn't be inside the handler. And the reason is very simple. Every time we come to this handler function, this handler, Go will have to compile this regex. So every time we call the handler, Go will have to compile the regex. And that's not good because we're wasting CPU cycles. So when you refactor the code, then of course it makes sense to move this regex out to a file where it's only compiled once. And you can give it to whichever handlers need it. Okay? If I have time, I'm going to refactor this code and then move all of this validation code along with the regex out. Because you notice our handlers they're crowded, and a handler should not be having so much code in it. Okay, you should comfortably have one screen full of code. Okay, 1.5 maybe, but not so much that you have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. That's not good. All right, so after we have done our validation checks, then we will need to check to see if there were any errors in the form. And then if there were errors, we simply redisplay the form, providing or passing in the correct data, as well as any that needs to show the errors. Okay. Of course, if there are errors, we will simply call server error. Again, we have done this. And so what I'm going to do, I will simply print out this message which says added a user. Obviously, we have not yet added a user, but I just want to test the work we've done so far. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to run this, and I'm going to, okay, this is my home page. Let's refresh, home, create a quote. Let's go back. Okay, so I want to sign up. So I have a link which allows me to sign up. Okay, so this is the sign up form. I'm going to sign up. Of course, it's telling me that I have an invalid email because an empty email is an invalid email. Okay, let's put in a correct email. Let's say dlewis, Let's leave the others blank. Okay, email is correct. Let's put in a password. Let's say apple juice. Okay, let's submit. Okay, notice it just does not return. It's correct, but it does not return it. And that's because we don't want the correct password that the user entered to be cached by the browser, because then anybody will be able to see it if they have access to the browser's cache. So let's put in a correct username, and so apple juice, then let's submit. Okay, don't save. Added a new user. So again, we have made progress. Okay, so what's the next thing we need to do? Well, the next thing we need to do is to actually create an insert function that we will call from here, from our handler, that will actually go ahead and insert the user into the database. But before we insert the user into the database, you will notice that we have to encrypt the password. So the password, even though it has those dots and it's hidden, it's still clear text. It's just text. And so what we want to do is to encrypt it. And once we have encrypted it, then we will store that encrypted version in our database. Okay, and so that's what we'll do next. So I'll see you in that lesson.